Welcome to the free-to-play strategy card game set in the Warhammer 40k universe known as WARPFORGE. In this video I'm going to be covering the overall premise of the game and the core mechanics of how to play a game of WARPFORGE. So by the end of this video you should know how to play a game, and I'm also going to touch a little bit on, as a new player, where to focus in the first few weeks of picking up the game. In a game of WARPFORGE you start by selecting your Warlord. This is chosen from one of the 6 starter factions. They are the Ultramarines, the Goth Clan Orcs, the Simharm Eldari, the Sautek Dynasty of the Necrons, the Black Legion from Chaos, or High Fleet Leviathan of the Tyranids. As you can see, there are 3 warlords to choose from for each of the starting factions. So let's dive into the mechanics of the game. The first screen that you'll be shown is what's known as the Mulligan Phase. Here, if you're going first, you will be shown 3 starting cards, and if you're going second, you'll be shown 4 starting cards. And this is the only time in a match where you're able to put back one of the starting cards into your deck and replace them with a different option. So make good use of this phase. During a turn you can play cards onto the battlefield from your starting hand. In addition, you can attack the enemy warlord either with your warlord or with any of the cards that had already entered the battlefield in the previous turn. Each card has an energy cost, and this is represented at the top right hand of the card. You can use energy from your total pool. The total energy available is shown here on the right hand side of the screen underneath the end turn button. It's the first turn of the game here, so we always begin with 2 energy. This means that we can play cards that cost 1 or 2 energy this turn, but we don't have enough to play cards that are more expensive. Note that this will of course mean that in the early turns you will be limited to low energy cost cards only. However, each turn your energy does replenish and the max amount of energy increases by 1. So next turn we will have 3 energy to play, the turn after will be 4, the turn after that will be 5, etc, etc, and it keeps on going uncapped. This does mean, for example, that a card that costs 10 energy typically won't be playable until turn 11, and though these expensive cards are very powerful, the game might not last that long. In addition to cards, your Warlord also provides you with what's called a Warlord talent, and he provides this every single turn of the game. Now in this example we have Uriel Ventris, and his talent is called Master of the Fleet, which says for 2 energy he can deal 1 damage to an enemy and its adjacent units. The Warlord's talent always shows up on the right hand side of your hand and is highlighted in pink, which shows that the card is temporary and will be discarded at the end of your turn. In addition to the Warlord talent, there are several different types of cards. The first type are called troops, and these can either be infantry or vehicles, as represented at the bottom of the card. Troops can be played alongside your Warlord onto the battlefield, building your ability to deal more damage to the enemy Warlord and thus finish the game. Similarly, once troops are played onto the battlefield, they can be used to attack enemy troops to defend your own Warlord from receiving damage. In addition to troops, we also have stratagems. Stratagems act as spells that have an immediate impact on the game and can be played directly from hand. Selecting a troop, we can see that in addition to energy, we also have some other key statistics to think about. On the bottom right, we have health points. In this case, the Primarius Intercessor has 3 health. This means that the troop will be destroyed once it has taken 3 or more damage. On the left hand side of the card, we see the troop's abilities to deal damage. Now in WARPFORGE there are 2 forms of damage. There are melee attack and ranged attack, represented by red for melee and purple for ranged. In this case, we can do 2 melee attack or 2 ranged attack. Troops can be played onto the board by dragging them from your hand and dropping them next to your Warlord. From next turn, you can use their melee and ranged attack values to attack the enemy Warlord or enemy troops. Each turn you can also attack with your own Warlord. Here we can see that Uriel Ventris also has 2 melee attack and 2 range attack, and I can select which type of damage I want by hovering over with the mouse and then dragging onto the unit that I want to attack, in this case the enemy Warlord. Once you have finished spending energy, playing cards and attacking, you can select End Turn. Note that you do have a timer, and as you reach the last 15 seconds, this will be highlighted in a countdown on the right hand side of the screen. Your opponent will take their turn, spending their energy, playing their cards, and also attacking you back. Some of our troops have a powerful ability called Flank, such as the Primaris Reaver. This ability is very powerful in WARPFORGE as it allows us to attack an enemy troop on the turn that we play it onto the battlefield. Note, it can only attack troops and not the enemy Warlord. When troops attack one another, the attacker gets to choose whether the clash will happen using melee attack or ranged attack. The two cards then clash, dealing their damage to each other's health. In this case we chose to attack with our melee option, dealing 2 damage to the Hormagon, and the Hormagon in turn dealt 2 damage back to our Primaris Intercessor. As you can see, both cards are now reduced to 1 health as they both began the duel with 3. To finish off this enemy Hormagon, I'm going to use my Warlord's ability to attack again, and this time I'm going to select range attack because we will do 2 damage to the Hormagon while they will actually do 0 in return. When 2 cards clash and deal damage to each other's health, this usually results in both cards either taking damage with potentially one or both of them being destroyed. You can attack once with your Warlord each turn in the same way as you can with cards, but note that your Warlord will take damage, reducing your overall Warlord health. As you can see, I still have 1 energy to spend on this turn, but actually I don't have any cards that cost that amount. So in this situation, you can go ahead and select End Turn. A big part of playing WARPFORGE is effective decision making on when to play cards and when not. For example, in this turn where we have 4 energy, we could play our Eliminator, which costs 3, or we could play 2 cards that cost 2 energy. Depending on this decision, the rest of the game will play out differently. So let's go ahead and use these mechanics that we've covered so far to play out a little bit more of this game, and I'm going to take you for a little tour around the board and show you what some of the other icons mean. So in the top left of the screen we can see who our opponent is. In this case we're playing against the Tervigon, which is an AI generated opponent. In other game modes we may be matched against a human opponent, and their in-game name along with their avatar will be presented in the top left hand corner. Underneath we have this little green icon which gives us a little recap of exactly what has been recently played. By selecting on the icon we get this pop-up which tells us what our opponent played. We can hover over the name of units so that we can understand what just happened. In the bottom left of the screen we can find our own avatar and in-game name, and this little Voxcast icon here, if we select, allows us to interact with our opponent. And the cool thing here is these are all animated and voiced over as well. In the top right and top left you can see our opponent's deck and you can see our deck, and if we select and hold down it will actually pop up to tell us exactly how many cards are left in our opponent's deck, and as you can see there's also a pop-up that shows how many cards are in hand. In a game of WARPFORGE each player has 1 Warlord and 30 cards in their starting deck. On the right hand side of the screen, as mentioned earlier, we have the End Turn button, and we can also see our max amount of energy and how much energy we have remaining along with our opponents. Finally, in the top right you will see the little settings wheel cog here. If we select on that it will pop up with options for altering the music, sound effect, voiceovers, and even allow you to resign from the game. This is particularly handy if you know that the game's lost and your time is better spent moving on to the next one. So that's the basic mechanics of the game. Obviously cards bring special abilities which you will want to learn over time. One ability that you will need to be aware of even as a new starter, however, is what's known as Vanguard. Vanguards protect your other troops and Warlord, as Vanguards must be attacked and destroyed before the opponent is able to target other units. Note that the exception to this is with stratagems, which usually can target anything that they choose. So that's how we play the actual game itself. But what to do as a new player? In WARPFORGE, right from the start, we have access to what's called practice mode. We can select on practice mode, and for each of the 6 factions, we are given pre-built decks that you can use and practice against the AI. Now the great thing about this is that you can actually complete your daily missions and therefore increase your collection whilst practicing and learning the mechanics of the game. If I'm to select on one of these, let's click on the Necrons for example, what you will get is a tutorial and 5 other pre-built decks. And the great thing is these include cards such as legendary cards that you won't actually have yet in your collection, and so you get to use and play with those cards before you even own them. In addition to practice mode, we have what's called draft. You get 1 free ticket to create a draft every single day, every 24 hours, and you can collect an in-game resource known as Blackstone, and this allows you to do what's called a premium draft, which does offer slightly better rewards when you complete them. In either mode, when you complete the draft, you have to try and win as many battles as possible. If you're defeated 3 times, then your run will end. The maximum amount of wins you can gain in a draft is 12, and basically the more wins that you get, the better the rewards will be. It's worth noting that on a premium draft, if you do get the maximum 12 wins, you will get a guaranteed legendary card as part of your reward. So I recommend new players to spend the first few weeks just going through practice mode and playing draft. Draft is much more fair because everyone draws from the same pools and it disregards people's collection. You unlock new cards for your collection as you play more games and complete daily quests, which can be found here in the rewards section on the right hand side. As you unlock new cards, you will be able to construct your own decks of 30 cards and then use your own decks in multiplayer mode. This is sometimes referred to as constructed or ladder. In the multiplayer mode, you will most often be pitted against a human opponent of a similar rank. As you win games, you can increase your ranking and work your way up through the different divisions all the way up to the legendary division. And on the left hand side here, you'll be able to find the leaderboard, which shows the top 50 players at any given time. Thank you for your support. I hope this has helped to make sense of the game. Please consider subscribing to the channel and stick around to continue learning the basics of the game. In the next video, I'm going to go into one of the most fundamental strategies for playing effectively, which ultimately determines whether you win or lose games.